Welcome to Get Even. Get Even is the podcast where Even founders Ellen and Nora, that's me, sit down with incredible women who've been there, done that in the world of business. Get Even is your backstage pass to their lived experience. You'll hear raw insights, personal stories, and the realities of success. Whether you're looking for inspiration, practical advice, or a peek behind the curtain of what it really takes to thrive, this podcast is for women ready to go further. It's time to get even. Today's guest is Jodi Geddes. When Jodi co-founded Circle In, she was a parent on a mission to make workplaces more supportive for working carers. 8 years later, after building a global business, she faced an entirely new challenge. Who am I without the company I built? So in this episode, Jodi and I chat about the highs and lows of building and exiting her own startup, the identity shift that follows a big career chapter, and why your personal brand matters more than your job title. And lots of practical tips on how to start building your own personal brand now if it's something that you feel is well overdue. So whether you're navigating career change, you're building your own business, you're returning to work, this is a conversation that will hopefully leave you feeling inspired to show up with confidence and with authenticity. Jodi, a very warm welcome to Even.
Oh, it's great to be here and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Can't wait. So let's start at the beginning of your journey with Circle In. I'd love to hear what inspired you to co-found Circle In and what was the problem that you were trying to solve at the time?
Yeah. So it's funny because when I think about Circle In, it's really easy for me to look back because essentially the idea came when I was pregnant. So I now look at my kids who are 10 and 12 and it gives me a really good indication of kind of the journey. So together with my incredible co-founder, Kate, we went through our pregnancies at the same time. And we saw a real need and a gap in the support we were receiving from our employer at the time. So back then, I went off on parental leave. I didn't get the support I wanted from my manager. We knew there had to be a better way. So we lent in and we spoke to over 1,000 working parents, and it was unanimous in that they all believed that they should be receiving better support from their employer. So we took the big leap and decided to leave, our corporate roles and launch Circle In back in 2017. We started very much with building a community and we built that very quickly. We had, 5,000 women, on day one of launch come and visit Circle In. So we knew there was a need and we really built that around storytelling, telling stories of everyday moments, the juggle and so forth. And then obviously we had to commercialize our business model. So then we had a business offering and that's really what Circle In became, in that we worked with brands that wanted to be better supporting, their working parents through every life stage. The likes of, over the 8 years, we worked with the likes of, Estee Lauder globally, Qantas, Xero, some incredible brands. I think we had 120 in the end that we supported over the 8.5 years. So it was an incredible journey. I feel like we were really creating the market when we started back in 2017. Back then there weren't a lot of providers out there doing what we were. And, we all love a bit of competition, but it's great to see that so many are now in the market because I think it's really a demonstration that, people are wanting support from their employer and they're demanding that now. So, yeah, it was a great 8.5 years.
I love it. And it's so interesting how that personal experience shapes your founding story. And I can relate to that juggle of having founded a business while trying to manage parenting as well, which I'm in right now. And it's great to see that, it obviously resonated and found its audience, found its community and found the need. But I'd love to hear from a personal perspective, having managed that juggle of founding a business as a parent, what were some of the pivotal moments for you, highs or lows, that really shaped you as a founder and as a person?
Yeah, it was funny. I was only talking to my daughter about this on the weekend. Like when we launched Circle In back in 2017 and we had national PR, we knew the story was going live, 7 a.m. the next morning. The day prior, I was in hospital with my little girl, like getting her tonsils out. And at the time, I just thought nothing, could be harder than this. But it didn't stop there. There were highs and lows at every point of the journey. Obviously, managing young kids was a huge challenge for Kate and I. We know kids go through so many different milestones and moments. We had to sacrifice a lot as founders. We worked incredibly hard, but there are a lot of amazing highs. We went to America, and I'll never forget being in New York and Kate and I, on Fifth Avenue, meeting Estee Lauder and signing them, signing Gap, met with Apple, Spotify, like the most amazing companies, and getting in front of like those global CMOs and chief people officers and so forth. Obviously raising, we had 3 raises over the 8.5 years. And I look at raising as a high and a low. It's a huge high in that when you close the deal, it's amazing, but the journey to get there is incredibly stressful and it's quite tiring. So, I could go on, but I just feel like I look back and I'm so proud of the journey. And I often say it was like an MBA on steroids. Every day you didn't know what you were going to get. There was always a different challenge, but it was an incredible journey. And we loved working with the customers that we did. They were the ones that genuinely wanted to build a family-friendly culture and support their employers.
I love what you just said around every day you never know what you're going to get. But it sounds like you really embraced all of it, the highs, the lows, and you ran with it.
Well, I think you have to. Like, if you're going to go on this journey and be a founder, you have to be comfortable with the highs, the lows. You have to be a risk taker. Like, there's so many attributes that come with being a founder. It's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. I personally loved it to start with. In the end, I found it quite challenging. It's a hard journey, especially when you get to, years 7 and 8 and beyond. It takes a certain person to be a founder. And yeah, I loved being on that journey with Kate. I wouldn't ask for anyone else to be by my side.
So let's talk about some of those career choices. As you said, you loved it and it did get a bit harder at the end. I want to hear about what that journey taught you about the concepts of identity, of career choices and purpose, and how you navigate the career choices that come after a startup journey.
Yeah, I think no one prepares you for an exit. And it's a little bit like having, a child and going back to work and the identity shift. It's a little bit similar, same, but different, you could say. I found the last year really challenging, especially when we made the decision towards the end there to, start the process of an exit. It's lonely being a founder, but put on top of that, exiting a business or trying to sell, it's a loneliness times 100, because you're all of a sudden in this position where you can't talk to anybody about what you're doing. It's highly confidential. And for me, there was a real conflict of values there, because I was always incredibly transparent with how I showed up. I am a bit of an oversharer. I tend to kind of tell more than I probably should. So I found that really challenging for me personally. Not that at any point you're lying, but you can't be your authentic self. And when that's like my biggest value, authenticity, that was quite hard. And you kind of get in a position where it doesn't feel like you're winning anywhere. So that was hard. And then I think no one prepares you for an exit. And that for 8.5 years, Circling did become my identity. It's who defined me. It was my brand, against my name, just like it was for Kate. We had that Circling brand aligned to who we were. Take that away, it's a moment where you stop and you think, who am I now? You have a reflection on the fact that when you're a founder, you're really good at everything, but you're not an expert at anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, because that's what a founder is. You're a generalist. You're there to sit across multiple areas. You're running the business. In any one day, you're going from sales to new product development to, legal to whatever it may be. That's the strength of a founder. And when you stop and you take that away and you think, well, actually, what's my core skill set? What am I really good at? It becomes a really difficult position. And I almost felt like I went through a rebrand myself and really finding my new purpose, who I was, how I wanted to show up. So I've got to a really great place. Everyone says the same old story, take your time, it will come to you. And I'm not a very patient person. So for me, I found The process really difficult, but I'm really happy to say that 6 months later, I feel like I'm in a really great place. I'm doing something I love, which is, helping individuals and companies to define and build and grow their personal brand. It gives me a creative outlet. It's something I truly believe in. So I feel like now showing up for work is really aligned to, who I am.
How did you navigate that transition and what helped you through that real shift in identity?
Yeah, I mean, everybody says time, and I hate to say it, it is time. It's not something, you go out looking for it and you just want answers, especially for me. As I said, I'm not patient and I just wanted that silver bullet. I wanted to know immediately, I wanted to build my website. I wanted to know what was my new LinkedIn bio, who am I now? But you can't. So I think for me, the real shift came when, there's a couple of things. I think I stopped asking everybody for advice and I actually started following my gut. And that was a really pivotal moment for me, because what I learned through that process is it's natural for all of us to do it, but we're quick to tell people why maybe they shouldn't be doing things because we feel like that's how we're adding value. So for me, I had a lot of people kind of trying to give me their advice or tell me what I should be doing, as opposed to, oh, that's a great idea, you should absolutely go for it. So it was only when I stopped asking for advice that things started to fall into place for me. I think the other thing was I changed my mindset and started to say yes to everything. Mm-hmm. And it was actually through that process that led me to realize what I really liked doing and what I didn't like doing. So I've taken a few jobs, over the past few months that, I'll be completely honest, haven't enjoyed as much as I thought I would have. And that's okay. Would I do them again? No, but I loved the experience. But what it taught me was actually what brings me joy and what I really want to go deep on. So it was a combination of time, following my gut, and saying yes to everything that really got me to the place I'm in now.
So it sounds like saying yes to everything is a form of experimentation and figuring out what works for you, what doesn't.
100%.
But it's an act, it's a doing rather than just taking from other people and kind of implementing what they're thinking or saying to you.
100%. I stopped listening to everybody. I mean, I still to this day have a couple of coffees a week with different people, and I'll always take advice and I always take something from the conversation, and I love that. But this was quite different. This was me purposefully going out to people and testing an idea and asking for feedback and advice. And, I kind of look back and think, no, this was about what I wanted to do and following my gut. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I'm not 100% there yet. I'm still experimenting, finding my way with different products, the types of companies I'm working with, but every day it's getting clearer and easier.
I like that, but I actually think it's quite important to, let's say, even if you were later on, I think it's quite nice to sort of have that mindset of you're evolving or you're work in progress, because I think to other people, especially, I want to get to the topic of personal branding, but to other people, when you think about something like building visibility or building your personal brand, you can look at what seems like a finished product for somebody else, and it can get really intimidating. And same with career. It can look like somebody has it all completely figured out. Positioning is excellent and it's just so crisp. But actually, what if we kind of deconstructed that a bit and said everybody is always a work in progress? And that includes, how you put yourself out there online. And so I just want to ask you about how you've thought about your own journey of putting yourself out there and what you've learned on that process.
Everybody is their own work in progress, and I don't think that ever stops. Even if you spoke to the most successful people, they'd say, with 200,000 followers on LinkedIn, they'd still say they're learning. The number of people I meet that say they're constantly updating, their website value prop or their LinkedIn bio, it changes, it evolves, because as humans, we're always changing. So for me, that has been a journey. But I think what I've always stayed true to, and this is why I'm so passionate about personal brand, is I've been authentic. I know who I am. I know how I show up. I know what I talk about, and I haven't shifted from that. And the number of people that over the last even month have just said to me, oh, I've loved your posts and I just love following your journey. You're always so authentic. I haven't moved from that. So yes, I'm talking about different things, but my content lanes and kind of who I am haven't really changed. So that's been, really, really important for me.
And what about some of the women who might be listening to our conversation? What advice would you have for them around getting started? So let's say we're talking to some people who would like to be more visible online, let's say on LinkedIn, but they're a bit hesitant. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a lot of people, I think they know they should be doing more with their brand, but they don't have time and they don't know what to say. So they're the two barriers that come up consistently. And there's probably another one being the cringe factor. A lot of people feel like it's chest beating, it's cringy to talk about yourself. So what I'm really trying to do is flip that conversation and make it easier for people to show up and know that it's not cringy. It's cringy if you talk about yourself in the wrong way. But if you flip the script and always make it about value back to your reader, it's not cringy. This is important for you. And I think people don't realize the importance of their personal brand. I actually had a call just before this, and someone I worked with many years ago, we caught up, and he's thinking of leaving his role. And what was really interesting is he said to me, I've left it too late. I need to build my personal brand. The number of people that say that, like, you need to be investing in it now. It's something you should always invest in. And I truly believe like your personal brand is more important than your company brand. And it fundamentally is the core reason why I believe we were successful at Circle In. Like, it led us sales opportunities. We actually had an acquisition opportunity, come across our table 2 years ago, all through our personal brand. I got, invited to podcasters speaking, all because I, invested. So I think some practical things that I would say is you need a plan. You absolutely need a plan. And that's not about a huge long strategy deck that's really hard to read. Just think about what are the 4 content lanes? What are the 4 areas that you want to show up authentically against? Once you've got them, there's no shortage of topics to talk about. So I go through a process.
What a content lane is?
Yeah. So like for me, one is female entrepreneurship. So I talk, you can imagine now that I've got that as a content lane, it is so easy for me to define so many topics under that. Last week I spoke about profiling 2 incredible women I met at an event. I talk about female groups that people can be. I'm all about female entrepreneurship. So once you've got your content lanes, and they are different for everybody. So one of the things I do is I'm really practical. I don't want to make this hard. In one session, you can come out with a really clear plan and know your content lanes. So there's that. I think, showing up consistently. People don't realize that only 1% of people on LinkedIn post at least once a week. 99% of people are visiting LinkedIn and just looking and scrolling and not engaging. So it's actually not difficult to cut through and show up. If you invest once a week in posting, in 6 or 12 months, come and speak to me and you will thank me for that investment in a small amount of time and what it will do for your personal brand. So I think it's about showing up, consistently, being authentic, knowing your content lanes, being authentic, dropping the cringe factor. So flipping the scripts and making it about value, and telling stories. Just talk from your heart. Everybody has a story. We've got ChatGPT now that is there to help you as an assistant. So use it to your advantage, use it to put in ideas, thought starters, and help craft,
Yeah. Actually, I'd love to hear your thoughts on to what extent do you use ChatGPT or other AI tools? So you said you use it to help you brainstorm ideas or to perhaps write parts of it, but where do you draw the line?
Yeah, so I've actually just built an AI tool to help people for this exact reason. But what I believe is that it's what you put in to ChatGPT. So for me, I go through a process of building a personal brand playbook. Out of that, I build a brand command, and then I build a custom GPT. So what that means is the GPT knows exactly who you are, your content lanes, how you talk. To give you an idea, the playbook I load is like 10 pages long. It is detailed, and the prompt is, a lot of work that I've built into it. What you can't use ChatGPT for is to go there now and say, hey, write me a LinkedIn post on an event I went to last week. That's inauthentic. That is not writing. But if you've done the work up front, you know who you are. It's there then to assist you to help craft that post. So I'll use it to go in and say, hey, give me some thought starters. I like that. I'll then go away and write a little bit and then come back just to refine it. So I'm using it as my assistant, not as my writer. But I've done the hard work to load my personal brand. It knows everything about me. So what it does is it makes my posting now take 5 minutes as opposed to 1 hour.
So you're getting over that, one of the barriers, which you said was a lack of time. The other thing, I do want to come back to the example that you gave about speaking to somebody just before this about who said, he'd left it
To leave their role.
Yeah. And I think there's something else which I hear quite often, and it's sort of the notion of your personal brand, or I think people often underestimate which one is more important. So your positional power or positional brand as affiliated with the company that you work for versus your personal brand. And I think what I see quite often is overinvestment in your time and your energy with your positional power, your positional brand, and underinvestment in the personal brand, where I actually think the risk is, I think you've got the risk wrong there, because I think, one of them can always be taken away. Things happen in organizations, whereas your personal brand, that's yours to keep and to shape and to craft. So I'm curious about whether you've got any observations on that or whether you see it differently.
Laughing because I'm literally in the final stages of my website, and my key headline on the first page is your personal brand is more important than your company brand. And you're absolutely spot on. I'm not saying we don't want to talk about the company we work with. And some of the work I do with organizations is around the intersection. And it's this beautiful piece where I empower employees to be able to show up authentically for themselves, but also talk about the company they work in. But the reality is people buy off people. They don't buy off companies. So as a founder, a senior, whoever you may be, your personal brand is the most important thing. If you think about any sales meeting you go to, anytime you're about to have a coffee or connect with someone, you don't go to the company. You go to them as a person. You check them out on LinkedIn. And it's essentially like a storefront. You're checking them out. You're quickly looking in 3 seconds and making an assumption around what was their latest post, what's their profile picture look like, what's their headline, what do they stand for? So it's so important to invest in the basics and then show up authentically, whether it's once a week. For some of the clients I work with, we set a goal of twice a month to show up on LinkedIn. That's okay. It's just about showing up consistently, but it absolutely is so important because you're right. You're not with your company forever. Sure, you might be a founder, but then you're like, man, you exit anyway. And then your circle in was stripped from me, overnight. So it's probably a testament to the importance of building your own brand.
Wow. And is it right? I think you wrote a piece which suggested that we're going to get to a point where companies are no longer looking at CVs as a recruitment tool, and instead it's actually just your social media presence.
I think we're already there. After I wrote that, a few people reached out and they're like, we're already there. That's all we use. If I'm looking to buy something or someone's buying off me, they'll just go straight to my LinkedIn. Hiring is the same. So yeah, we're absolutely there. That's something I truly believe. But yes, I think in 4 or 5 years, CVs as they stand, like maybe we won't even, my daughters may not even know the term by the time they're, going into the workforce.
Yeah. What else have you seen shift in how people are showing up online and how we navigate sort of professional online spaces like LinkedIn, how we navigate them now compared to when you first started Circle In?
Yeah, a huge shift. What I'm really seeing is the rise in employee-generated content. And if you look at any of the marketing trends, it's up there as one of the top marketing trends. And essentially, that is empowering your employees to know what they can and can't say, but giving them the confidence and authority to be able to show up online and talk about their brand in a positive way. Tell stories of, getting into work, what it's like in the office they work in, the people they work with, a fun team day they just went to. That is so powerful. And that says more about a brand than some marketing company post that feels generic and corporate. So there's a real shift to this employee-generated content. It's not a buzzword. I actually think in 2 to 3 years, we'll see more and more companies kind of embracing this. And also I think employees will start to be paid as influencers.
Interesting. Wow. So then really what you're saying is it's more about frameworks for content around how employees are encouraged to show up.
Yeah,
But it's actually we're fully not just allowing it, but encouraging it.
100%. And for a lot of businesses I work with, they'll say our employees don't know what the guardrails is. Like they don't know what they can and can't say. So it's just putting in place some simple frameworks of do this, don't say this. This is how we speak. And once people have that, they're then empowered to be able to talk. And it's not just on LinkedIn. Internal channels are a huge, avenue for that employee generated content and showing up authentically. So the majority of work I do is around empowering individuals in the workplace to show up on LinkedIn and those internal channels like your Viva, your Facebook workplace, or whatever it may be.
What else have we missed when it comes to the topic of personal branding? Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you think our community would be interested in?
I think just it's for people to really stop, take a moment and think, what is my brand? How am I showing up? And if you're getting onto your computer each week and you don't know what to post about, that's okay. But there are people out there that can help, or there's ways that you can find, like, what are your lanes? And think of it this way, it gives you a competitive edge. It gives you a competitive edge to stand out amongst your peers and others, and opportunities will open. And it may take a little while, but invest in your personal brand and you will reap the rewards in years to come.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think it's surprising to me how often opportunities come that way. And you never know where they're going to come from, but it's often it's a DM conversation that started a project, or it's a coffee that was scheduled over LinkedIn and it turns into a project. You just never know.
Totally. Well, I've built my entire business in the last few months off my personal brand. Like every opportunity has come through LinkedIn, through a post I did where someone has DM'd me and said, I love that. Hey, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing. And then that's led to a conversation. So yeah, it's, and even us now, we're here doing a podcast. Like it's not just sales opportunities. It's speaking, it's thought leadership, podcasts, whatever it may be.
That's right. Yeah, I think our conversation started through a DM. So
I think so. Yeah. I love that.
So back to Circle In then, and I do want to come back to some advice that you might have based on, there's so much content that you built for Circle In and so much that you did to support working parents and their employing organizations. And many of the members that we have on Even now are also working parents. So I'd love to hear, what advice do you now have that you can give to parents who might be returning to work after leave? Let's take that as a first example.
Look, there's so much advice. I think the one thing that I still firmly believe in and would encourage everyone to do is to own the conversation. To own how you're feeling, to lean in, speak to your manager. If you're having a hard time, if you've got a difficult child, whatever your situation is, don't sit there in silence. Have the confidence to lean in and let someone know, what's the support you need? How are you feeling? Could a shift in your role make a huge difference? Really to own that conversation. And it's kind of at every stage, even going off on leave. If you're wanting a pay rise, you've got to lean in with confidence. I think as women, we often sit back and think, I won't have that. I can't ask for that. You absolutely can, have the confidence. But returning from parental is a really challenging time. And like I said, it's a little bit like what I've gone through. There's a full identity shift and imposter syndrome hits hard and all of these things. And you're juggling childcare and a sick kid and constantly having to call in. So you're not alone. Lean in and ask for help. And I think the other tip that I really would encourage everyone to do is to look around your workplace and find like-minded parents and start a little support group. I was at NAB at the time. And that's what I did. I got 8 women who returned at the same time, and we'd catch up once a month for a coffee. And it wasn't to sit and moan about how difficult it was. It was actually to support one another and help each other through the various work challenges that we all had. And, I really, really loved that.
Wow, that really resonates. I've had various groups like that over the years as well. And I found sometimes that's the only thing that you need is just to know that you're not alone. There are other parents out there juggling the same things and, hearing each other's stories that are sometimes bordering on ridiculous in terms of the things that you might encounter just before 8 a.m. That alone is actually just all you need. Sometimes it's just a bit of support and they don't need to fix anything.
That's why, I go back to, if we go back to LinkedIn, it's the power of storytelling, keeping it real. People just want to know they're not alone. So yeah, it's incredibly powerful.
And what about the employer side? We know that parents and other caregivers do carry a lot of invisible labor. And what's been your advice on the workplace side of things? How can employers support working carers?
Yeah, I think, again, like we could go down the policy path or so many different things, but I'm going to keep it simple. And it's, again, tell stories. Normalize the conversation, role model this is at a senior leader level. Some of the most powerful things we did at Circle In was actually go into an organization and gather, 9-10 stories of parents at each stage of their journey and package those up and share them across internal comms channels on the platform. And again, it goes back to people not feeling like they're alone, knowing that they work for a supportive workplace, that they're walking the talk, all of those things. So for me, storytelling is the best way to drive cultural change. And I think that's a really easy and quick win for employers.
Thanks for sharing that. So on the storytelling side of things then, which is actually, I think that's a consistent thing that's come out through our conversation and the importance of it. But I'd love to hear some of your stories of best and worst career advice. It's a question we ask every guest on the Get Even podcast, and we love hearing the best and the worst stories.
Yeah, so I think I don't know if I've got a worst, but my best advice that I ever received was that you can restart your day at any time. And it's something that I've held on to, use consistently, even in my work now. Like if you're having a bad day, whether it's at work, even with your kids, you can take a deep breath and restart. And so for me, that's got me through, especially my daughter's autistic. So for me, especially in those early years, work was a real challenge for me. So to be able to take a deep breath and restart, that was the best career advice I ever received.
I love that. I'm thinking about it now. I've had a good day, but I know some of the parenting days, especially, and then some of the work days as well, where you could be just one bad meeting or one difficult conversation or one tantruming toddler.
Yeah, don't let it define you. Just try and take a deep breath. And, it's something that I've had to get better with over time, but I definitely try to live by that now.
Fabulous. Is there anything else that you think would support the women who are uneven that we haven't covered yet? Any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share with them?
No, I just think I'd go back to, you're not alone. If you're thinking something, someone else is thinking the same. Someone has been through the challenge that you're going through, even though you probably feel like you're the only one going through it. Just lean on other people, like lean on your community, lean on other females. It's amazing what a coffee can do, to fill your own cup, your confidence. I feel like I walk away from every coffee with one nugget of advice or inspirations. I really encourage you to lean on the community. Don't be afraid to ask someone. The number of people that will reach out to me now and say, hey, can I have a coffee? Virtual coffee or whatever it may be. So do that within your network. If there's someone that sparks interest for you, reach out to them and say, hey, let's connect.
Amazing. Well, I hope our conversation today has encouraged some people to increase their network, reach out, have another coffee, and start getting a bit more active on social media and build their personal brand. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, sharing your expertise with us today, Jodi. That was awesome. I'm Dr. Nora Koslowski, co-founder of Even, where our mission is to accelerate women's economic potential. Check out even-careers.com to learn how we support women and business to get even.